Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and I am here today with Linda Lang. So welcome, Linda.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here again with you today, Christine.
It's always fun to talk with you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we will move into our conversation?
Absolutely. I'm calling myself these days a consciousness coach and a metaphysical transformation guide.
Hmm.
Essentially, I'm using energy work, mind shifting techniques, intuition, and spiritual guidance to create change for myself and for clients.
Perfect. And I know you are also an alchemist of sorts, which we will get to at some point during our conversation, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That's actually a label, let's say, that my spirit guides gave me. They call me an emotional alchemist.
We'll have to get into what that means as we move forward. All right, so we were going to start our conversation today with some talk around the idea of illusion. So I had written a novel called God and Drag, and it's been out for quite some time, and I kind of orphaned it out on Amazon, and it's popped its little head back up and said, I'm ready for some action. So what people ask me most about that book, so when book groups contact me or individuals contact me, it's they love the story. It gets good reviews. It's got 5 stars on Amazon. So the book starts out, the first paragraph says, Raj taught me 3 things before he returned to India. First, everything is an illusion. From the fingers we use to pinch our skin, to the pain of the pinch, to the body that experiences the pain. And the second paragraph starts out, the second illusion was that we choose our illusions. Then the book moves on from there, and it's a great story that takes place in India, but it talks about kind of the levels of illusions that we live in and how we transcend those illusions through this story about a man who goes to India to find the stepfather that he thought abandoned him. And people, they like the story, but they really are interested in the ideas. And so we wanted to talk a little bit today about the illusion and what that means and how to transcend illusion and enjoy the illusion. And there's a great saying that says, the illusion is here to serve you. You are not here to serve the illusion. And yet we have all been taught throughout our lives that we really serve the illusion, that life is real and we need to conform ourselves to life. And all of the things that are fraught within that kind of view of what life is and what the illusions are that we live under. And so that's where we're going to go today with our talk. So what to you, Linda, is like, how do you perceive illusion, or how do you experience the illusion that we live under?
Probably the clearest example I could give you would be of an experience that I had while taking an inner journey. And I was taken to a place that would probably be equivalent to the Akashic Records, except
Mm-hmm.
it looked more like NASA. And there were all of these like television or computer screens on the wall. There were tons and tons and tons of them. And I was being led by my guide through this
Mm-hmm.
room. And the second I looked at any one of those TV screens, I was in it. I was in a life experience. Think of
Wow.
it like the holodeck
Mm-hmm.
on Star Trek. It's so real and it's so all encompassing. The second I would look at that, I would be completely encompassed. I would forget where I was, what I was doing, and they'd have to come and pull me out. And eventually, I just couldn't even look. Like, I thought it was fascinating and I wanted to kind of see, but I couldn't even look towards the wall of screens because it's so real when you're in it.
Well, it is, and I'm glad you brought up that holodeck, because one of the theories of reality that we are living in is that we're kind of a projected hologram having a physical experience, but that it's almost like a hologram or a holodeck, where it's a projected experience that we individually are having and we're having collectively, but that it doesn't exist outside of the projection, which is kind of, I mean, that's like deep diving down the rabbit hole of illusion, where, down to the quantum sort of level, where everything is really the observer, and that we are observing and projecting and experiencing this life. And I've heard speakers who have talked about how when we are not paying attention to life, it just kind of blinks out and it blinks back in when we put our attention back on it. I mean, some really deep ideas of of how much of an illusion we live under, not just the mental constructions of the stories we tell ourselves, but the actual physical life that we live. And even when you pay attention to or think about that level of illusion, like, I know for me, it was really freeing when I came across that and I really let it flow through my body. Like, if that's true, then all of this constructed moral universe that I lived in, that was all based on religion and Western civilization and, human history and Earth and all this, none of that would actually have been true. All of that would have just been ideas that had been taught, and it wiped away a huge amount of obligation in my system, obligation to this made up reality, if it was in fact a hologram. So that one idea about what life might be, and how it really might be an illusion at that level, was in and of itself just amazingly freeing.
I'm not sure that humans can really understand the true nature of reality because it is so foreign
Mm-hmm.
from what we perceive while we're here.
I agree. I don't think we're set up to do that, but I don't think we need to understand the true nature of reality in order to recognize that we are living under layers and layers and layers of illusions. And that if we are open to the idea that a lot of what we say is reality, a lot of the images that we interact with as reality, are themselves either individual ideas or group ideas, that really sets us free to make a different choice of how we want to live our lives. Let's see, what's a good example of this? How an economy works. And here's a really good example for what we're what we're going through right now. That we have there's like some basic kinds of ideas in the world about how economies can work. So we've got socialism, we've got communism, we've got capitalism, all these different ideas, and we relate to the idea of this as something that's real. And we've created systems around this thing that is real. We've attributed it with lots of qualities about rightness and wrongness and goodness and badness that we think are real. But in and of itself, it's just an idea. It's not any kind of reality. There's not anything that is innately good, bad, right, wrong, or true about it. It's just an idea that we all buy into. Or even money, which is just an idea that we all believe in.
Yeah, the collective illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And when you believe in it as true, you subjugate yourself and your life to this external idea, instead of living from your inner truth and interacting with the world from that deeper level truth of you.
And I think as we all grow a little bit older, we begin to understand the idea of illusion, that kind of collective illusion of
Mm-hmm.
obligation or fruitless desires or things that we thought we should do that didn't bring us any joy, we
Mm-hmm.
start to really get a different sense of what our life experience is about. And it's not about accumulating.
Mm-mm.
It's about relationships and experiences and discovering who we are through those experiences.
Yes, and understanding that, and this is something that really for me, it took me a long time to get this because I loved that deep inner exploration. And so every time I would let go of like a idea or a mental construction or an emotional hitch or something like that, and I would come into this deeper level of awareness and understanding and perspective, like then all of a sudden I made that true. And then that became confining, and then I transcended that, and then the next thing became true. And then finally I was like, well, okay, that's not, getting attached to the next layer of freedom and making that true is just another level of illusion. And so I came into just a more fluid practice with this, that as I let go of things and I settled into a deeper awareness, I had an understanding that that awareness was in and of itself also kind of like a bigger box, and that outside of that was another bigger box, and that when it was time for that idea or awareness or illusion to fall away because it either no longer served me or was also based on something that was untrue at a deeper level, that there would be another layer and another layer and another layer. And I think we get attached to our ideas about life and about what's true and about what we want to be true, because if we have a construction about how the world works or what's true about the world, and we can relate to that idea as truth, then we have kind of an ideology to live by.
Well, I think that is the problem, really,
Yes, I
is our
agree.
attachments, our
Yes.
attachments. When
Yes.
we can just experience what is for the experience
Mm-hmm.
without that attachment, then we are free to recreate something new. We are
Mm-hmm.
free to be open to new possibilities, to expand our experience and our growth. Those attachments, though, boy, oh boy, you know, they're sticky. They're something we all have on some
Yes.
level. We've worked through some of them, those of us who've done our inner work, even people who haven't. I'm sure they've
Mm-hmm.
worked through some of their attachments.
Yeah, in different
But
ways.
yeah, boy, oh boy. You know, it kind of reminds me, this conversation, of a movie called What Dreams May Come. It really speaks to this whole topic of illusion. In the movie, Robin Williams' wife goes through a depression
Mm-hmm.
because I believe their son died there as a child. And she goes through this deep depression, and he's trying everything to get her out of that depression.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts talking to this guide who comes in, and the guide's name is Albert, and he's like a wise old man, and he wears glasses, and he's trying to explain to Robin Williams about the nature of reality and the universe,
Hmm.
and how thoughts create. And there's a line in that movie that says, like, it's something like, well, if nothing is real, why are you wearing glasses? And he says, they're a figment of my imagination. And I thought that was just like really well said.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to imagine that because maybe it makes him feel wiser or comfortable in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say anything more about Albert because I don't want to give anything away in that story in case anyone wants to watch it. It is a really thought-provoking movie, and not a funny comedy like Robin Williams
Yeah.
is well known for.
All right. Well, I will have to check that out as well. And I think everybody, if they really look at their life, has found those times where they've either changed their mind about something that they thought was real or true, or that they've had an event that has revealed that whatever they had thought was true is not as true as they had made it out to be. And so that's one way of letting go of an illusion. And we let go of illusions about people, we let go of illusions about relationships, but we do tend to then be back in that attachment. And I have this little thing I do around attachment and aversion, because I think both of those work together, that we get attached to an idea or a way that things are, or our image of a person or our image of ourselves. And then we have an aversion to things that are uncomfortable, that, maybe a truth that we know is down there deep, but we don't want to see it. So we're averse to looking at it, or averse to a situation that might reveal something about a person, or something that you don't want to know about. And so I think those two work really well together. And we're very good as humans at living from the images and the ideas and the illusions that we create in our brain, because that's actually how our brain operates.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even on an unconscious level, images are one of the language of the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of what we experience is just a projection through the unconscious? Or, I know you've studied as well the unconscious, you
Mm-hmm.
know that there's so much information in our field of vision, in our environment, but our conscious mind can only, pick out, just a fraction of that. And it's essentially our unconscious mind that filters it.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it filters it based on our expectations, which are
yeah,
based on our ideas, illusions, and images.
exactly. So we get more of the same.
And it's interesting because that's how technology, in terms of like social media and things, and even just computer advertising work as well, is that their algorithms are designed to confirm your ideas and illusions. So if you like something, if you believe in something, quote unquote, or if you're interested in something, like if you want to buy something or you're searching for something online, all these algorithms are going to come back and feed you more of what it thinks that you're interested in or what you're paying attention to. So when you understand that that's how your filters work, then you understand that really what you see is the world that you want to see. And it's not until you begin to either find some disappointments with that world, or have, get some years under your belt to realize that the way that you've seen the world has changed several times, and that maybe there's more to the story than what you have been focusing on. That when you're really open to questioning your own chosen ways of looking at things, that's when you're able to see something larger. Or when you clear your cookies and all of this, then you start fresh on what shows up in the advertising on the sites that you look at. It's an interesting exercise to consciously look at the world that you expect to see, and begin to search for other things. So search YouTube for things that are new and interesting and fresh for you, and new ideas or new news sources or new something to begin to show you a different kind of image or illusion than the one that you're used to or seek out. And it's a good way to begin to kind of crack open some of the illusion that just is so natural that it seems like it's true.
And even when the world that we see isn't comfortable, or the world that we
Mm-hmm.
want to see, we hold it in place with our attachments, our
Mm-hmm.
beliefs. So it is a really good way to start bringing in new ideas and new explorations, to start to be able to shift and release those old attachments to who we thought we were, how we thought other people were, how we thought the world works. I actually have a really interesting story that
Okay.
really fits in really well. I have a brother-in-law who is a very difficult person. He's a
Mm-hmm.
very difficult person to be around. And when my kids were younger, we actually went on a summer vacation with him and my sister. And I've always said that, I just love my sister so much. It's like I just have to accept her husband because I'm not willing to give up
Yeah.
my sister for that. But he was such a difficult man. And we were at I guess a hunting and fishing lodge. We were fishing. It was on a lake, kind of a cottage scenario. And I remember just like, oh my God, thinking, what is this about? Like, he was so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately, what I saw, maybe you would say I saw with spiritual vision instead of my regular eyes, or
Mm-hmm.
who knows if what your regular eyes sees is actually really real. But the
Yeah.
whole scene shifted, and it was like all of a sudden I was back further. My perspective was further away.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was shown was how much love he had in his heart and how much he wanted things to go well and be right,
Mm-hmm.
and to teach my kids how the right way of doing things, even in his difficult way of being, and like very you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way, and his way of expressing that. But even that was born from a seed of love. And I was like, wow,
Mm.
okay, because I was not getting that on a physical level. I was not getting that on a physical level. And it was like magic to me, really, to think that the way I was perceiving it,
Mhm.
was totally shifted.
And that's a beautiful story and a great way of demonstrating the idea of, that we have these images that we hold of people, and especially people we've known a long time, or family, or people that we interact with, or, that we spend a lot of time around, is that we're not necessarily, especially with family, interacting with the person who they are in that moment. We're not allowing them to show up fresh as they would like to be, in the same way that we would like to show up. We'd like people to accept us to show up as fresh as how we would like to be. We kind of have this image of them, and we interact and relate to them as the image we have of them. And oftentimes we're coming from our own image of ourselves interacting with the image of the other person. So it's like, it's like the two holographic images on stage. And one of the practices that I've started doing is to really begin to, and I do this by bringing up a big whiteboard in my mind with the person's name on it. And I just see all the things I attach to that person, all the ideas, all the judgments, all the conditioning, everything I have about that person. And I just erase it. And I just keep doing that. And I keep doing that. And I keep doing that. And I keep doing that, so that I'm better able to interact with somebody and let them be who they are, fresh in that moment, rather than me having a picture of them based on all of the impressions I've had about them all through time. Because oftentimes our strongest impressions about people are negative. And so when that's our image, and we're kind of guarding against all these negative images we have about a person, then we're interacting with this idea we have about them rather than who they are in that moment.
That's actually the teaching of the Hawaiian process called Ho'oponopono.
That's another really good one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's pretty well out in mainstream, with the Joe
Mm-hmm.
Vitale teaching the four statements that you say.
Mm-hmm.
In my Huna training, we have a shamanic way of doing it. We don't do the four statements, but we do cut the cords. The
Mm-hmm.
cords are really important, and they're called aka cords, but they really are attachment to our perceptions of that
Mm-hmm.
person. And so we are taught that every day we cut the cords of all the people we've interacted with, so that tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
or the next time we see them, we are seeing them new.
And I think it's important to also clear my attachments, judgments, images, impressions, ideas of myself. so that I'm able to show up fresh in the moment and not full of my judgments of myself in the past.
Absolutely. And in fact, in Ho'oponopono,
Mm-hmm.
when you are doing that forgiveness process, you are in fact forgiving that aspect of
Mm-hmm.
yourself. You know, the world reflects
It does.
what you have
It does.
inside. So what you're seeing in someone else is somewhere in your psyche and
Yes.
ready to be healed if you're seeing it.
And if you are acting from the image of yourself, you are acting from all the illusions that you have about yourself, and you're unable to then be able to tap into that deeper truth of who you are and that spontaneous expression of who you are in the moment, from a deeper place than all the ideas you have about yourself. And that's really, when we can make that shift, and even just the idea of understanding that all the ideas that we have are mental and emotional constructions, all of these filters and ways of being in the world are in and of themselves ideas and constructions, and not true and real at that very deep level. And if you can begin to allow yourself to just open to that idea, and open to the idea that our collective reality is a collective idea, and maybe a collective hologram deck, who knows, but that those things aren't more real than you are. And if everything is free to be what it is in the moment without all of the layers of idea and illusion, that you're able to be with life as it is and accept and surrender and flow with what's happening in the moment, instead of bringing all of the baggage and all of the ideas of how things are supposed to be and how you are supposed to be, and trying to make those work out on a stage where that's probably not going to work out, at least not in your favor. It's very frustrating to do that, and very stressful.
You know, Christine, I think one of the most limiting beliefs that we can have is that we are right.
Oh my gosh, that's a huge one. If we all let go of that, imagine what the world would be.
Oh, there's so much more possibility available. You know, maybe we're right on one level, but there are so many
Hmm.
other levels of information and experience and spirituality possible
Yeah.
on anything.
And when you are attached to that idea of being right, so there's two things I want to say about that. One is the brain actually works to make you think you're right, because otherwise we'd be paralyzed, because we'd be overwhelmed with information all the time. We kind of have to choose our rightness, and so our brain is designed to make us think we're right, whether we are or not. So when you're talking to the other person and they think they're right and you think you're right, your brains are both like locked in that pattern. So that's one thing to know about it. And then the other thing to know is that anytime you're in that stance of being right, you are making everything that is not exactly that stance wrong. And that's a real confrontational, stressful way to be in the world, because no two people have the same idea of what's right. Even if they agree on a larger principle, they don't agree on every single thing. And right now, at least in the US, and I don't know how much this is in Canada, everybody's very locked into their idea of what's right. And it's causing all kinds of turmoil, and everybody's kind of siding on who's right like them. And then within those groups, they're fighting about who's most right about this. Like, how right are you? How close are you to my right? And are you right? And then these other people are like, well, I'm not that right. And so they're wrong. And it's just like this whole swamp of rightness and wrongness that is highly stressful to the body system, and really makes for a dysfunctional community and society, because you're always then in opposition to everything that is not you.
And it makes that path forward very narrow.
It does. It does. And it's all based on brain, the brain making you think you're right, and on a whole bunch of ideas that may or may not be true. One of the things that has been really powerful to me, and it took a lot to be able to ask myself this without feeling like my world was collapsing, because this was probably 20 years ago, 25. maybe more, I don't know. Anyway, where I started asking myself, is this really true? And then I would ask myself, what if this wasn't true? And it would allow me to, when I ask, what if this isn't true, or what if this wasn't true, to be able to, because your mind just automatically begins to answer that question, to be able to see other ways of being, or other ways that the world might work, or other viewpoints that other people have, that softened my attachment to how I was viewing the world, or what I thought was right. And that was really powerful. But for a little while with that, because my identity was so attached to what I thought was right, that I was having like these identity crises, 50 times a day. And I had to learn to deal with that. But it was really powerful as a dismantling thing to begin to question and explore, if this isn't true, what else is out there? What else is possible? And it helped me let go of, and I still get caught in being right. I still have that brain chemistry too, but it helped me to really be able to slip out of that and stay in a more open stance, and be able to see things more clearly as they are, and what's possible, and what people are bringing to things, what ideas and things people are bringing about themselves and about situations, and kind of look beneath those to see the deeper currents and the deeper energies that were at play.
Well, it definitely helps you to hear another
Mm-hmm.
person's perspective and step into that place of empathy when you don't have to be right. You can at
Yeah.
least understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah. And I've also found that that place where, because your mind is always, your conscious mind is always trying to find that new place of rightness. Being right and being attached to being right is a real impulse. It's a real compulsive brain activity that we have. And so in listening to somebody, instead of that scramble of trying to find the rightness in there for you or for them or for anybody, to just be able to hear and allow and empathize, basically, without trying to come to a decision or a conclusion or a judgment about what's right based on what they're saying. And it's a habit that's hard to break. But if you begin to break the habit of having to come to a conclusion, of having to come to a decision, or having to come to a judgment, then that's one way that you keep yourself from attaching to a new illusion. And you're better able to kind of roll and flow with all of the various illusions that are part of our life, moment to moment.
And I think it's very healing for the other person as well. We're
Mm-hmm.
not used to truly being listened to, not truly, having
Yeah.
someone listen with presence to what you have to say. And it's just very, very healing without trying to change their mind or
Mm-hmm.
to input your ideas. I think that's
Yeah.
really a gift we can easily give.
And it's a way of valuing people and helping somebody, even if you never agree with them, to feel valued and validated, not because you agree with them, which is kind of how we're operating now, is we want everybody to agree with us, but to validate their existence as a human, validate that they have a right to their own ideas, to validate that they are, a valuable human being, and to value them as a person and a presence, instead of trying to invalidate them because they don't agree with a viewpoint that you have, which is another thing that has kind of just up all over the world right now.
Yes, and we forget that those thoughts and ideas and beliefs can change.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can be present with that person and not attached to the past of what they might have said or what they might have thought,
Mm-hmm.
then we are actually allowing ourselves that opportunity to evolve as well, so
Yeah.
that we see the evolution of that person who's in a new place. And that person's not going to be in that same place a week from now. We're constantly shifting when we can
Yes.
release those little aka cords or those little attachments to things. So it is a metaphor, life is a metaphor of what we see with others, how we
Hmm.
treat other people. Those are gifts we're also giving ourselves.
It is. And I think that's particularly important. When I was doing clinical hypnotherapy work, it always really comes down to your earliest patterns, which are almost always attached to your caregivers or family in some way. And it's interesting that when people would talk about their parents and they would relate to their parents or consider their parents to be the person that they were when they were having that critical incident at 5 years old or 2 years old or 10 years old or something, and that was part of the image that they had of their parents. And it was like they had a really bad moment or a really bad day. I mean, sometimes it was worse than that, but oftentimes, a critical incident that got locked in somebody's psyche was a particularly bad day that somebody was having, or a bad response, or a snappy thing, or something that really made this huge emotional catastrophic impression, and that's the parent that they're relating to for the entire rest of their life. And so in that relationship, their parent is that person, and they're 5 years old again, and they're bringing their 5-year-old self and the image of their 5-year-old self to this relationship, and interacting with this person from when they were 28 or 29 or 50 or whatever years old, having a bad day. And that was how they were relating. That was a relationship. Only usually there was multiple levels of that. So you bring your whole childhood and adolescence, and you never let your parents get older and more mature. We think about it in terms of parents not letting their kids grow up and not wanting their kids to grow up, but we don't actually, as kids, let our parents mature and evolve either, until we begin to do that deeper work of letting go of those things that we've been holding on to, and allowing them and us to operate from where we are now, instead of these old locked in places, these old locked in place ideas.
Perpetuating the illusion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do alchemy. Tell us a little bit about the emotional alchemy that you do, because that's kind of relates to this work.
I think it does, really, because of the stories that we tell ourselves and the way we perceive ourselves, the way we perceive others, life. When we can create those internal shifts,
Hmm.
then we can shift what is possible, and we shift our experience of life. And for me, Christine, it's like you don't have to work at the actual change because you've
Hmm.
changed on the inside. The
Yeah.
outside automatically shifts.
Yes. Yes.
So when I say alchemy from the inside out, it is really about shifting those things on the inside that create change on the outside.
Perfect. And I want to say one thing about that. I've been doing some writing about this because it speaks to the nature of the illusion and memory. And there's plenty of studies that what we remember isn't actually accurate anyway, because everybody remembers something based on their own subjective experience, not based on objective criteria. But also, people's memories change based on how their vibrational change on the inside. Okay, so one other thing about memory, there's lots of different theories about this. One of them is that memory is actually not kept inside of us. Memory is out in the field, and we draw on the memories that we need in the moment. And there's another really out there theory that we are in the now. We are who we are in the moment, and that our past stretches back from that now into memories that support the now. And I know when I was working with clients as a hypnotherapist, and we would do deep work, and originally they would come, we would talk about what they wanted to change, we go through some critical incidents, I get our history and things like that, and then we do some deep work. They would come back 3 weeks later, and I would ask what had changed. And oftentimes they're like, well, I don't really feel like there was a change, because, the change is so deep and so seamless that you still kind of feel like you, but that their inner landscape had changed. And I would ask them to tell me the story again about what had happened. And the stories would often change. And sometimes they would change, like either there was no emotional attachment to a story anymore, so it was just kind of irrelevant, or sometimes they could barely remember it because the emotional attachment was gone. And so that particular memory had just kind of faded completely. Sometimes they would bring a completely different memory, and there would be different people, there would be a different timeline, there would be a different something. And I'd be like, well, okay, so this is what you told me originally. And they're like, well, that's not how I remember it now. But how they remembered it then supported the new place that they were in emotionally. And so it was fascinating because it speaks to another level of illusion that the memories that we hold on to are in and of themselves illusory in many ways. And to not be so attached to our ideas of what's happened, because our ideas of what's happened shift and change based on who we are in the moment.
I remember when I was taking my NLP training, and we were taught that memory is not as solid as we think it is. That the
No.
first time you remember an incident, you are actually remembering whatever happened. But the
Mm-hmm.
second time, you're remembering your memory of it. And as you go
Mm-hmm.
down that line, it's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
like playing telephone. That memory shifts because you've thought about it or you've told other people about it.
Mm-hmm.
And each time you're putting in, your feelings about it, your new perceptions about it.
You attribute meaning to it in different ways.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally different than what actually happened. And then we take that memory that we've created, essentially, we've created it, and we live our lives around that memory.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really understand how we have so much more power to create our
Mm-hmm.
life than we think we have.
Because when we dislodge the emotions from the memory, and we allow things to be as they are, we're not then projecting those into the image of that person or our life or a situation. And we're much freer to be able to flow with what's happening and be fresh and spontaneous in our response, rather than bringing our entire perceived history to whatever's happening in the moment.
Exactly.
All right, so Linda, you actually run an alchemy group that you do a lot of this interchange work with. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Christine. I've taken the four things that I love to do the most and
Mm-hmm.
that I've found to be the most effective to help people change, to make a group that is fun, enjoyable, and also can create some huge internal shifts for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it Alchemy from the Inside Out. It's a pretty new group, and in this group, we do water blessings every month to support our change or whatever we're working on. We take inner journeys, which are, to me, they're very much like being in a dream. They're the
Mm-hmm.
language of the unconscious mind, so that you can actually get an idea of what's going on the inside and make shifts on an unconscious level. We also do a belief change and energy activations that kind of support our growth. I must say, I'm having an absolute blast doing it. I love doing this work. It's not as emotionally demanding as repeating your stories
Mm-hmm.
over and over and talk therapy, that kind of thing. But it's really a way to create change. And you can do this even just for fun, and you will be amazed at how much change.
Well, and if people want to get a taste of that, because it is profound change and it's a lot faster, this kind of energy work is much faster than talk therapy. You have done, or in our podcast together, you've done water blessing and an energy activation shift and belief shift, and that was kind of DNA shifting. So, or spiritual DNA shifting. So if you want to get a taste of some of that stuff, you can go back to some previous podcasts And you can find all of those at conversationsfromtheedge.net, and just look under Linda and you'll see our conversations underneath there. Or people can look at your website or your YouTube channel. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how people might be able to get a sample of your magic?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a few water healings on my YouTube channel. It's Thought Change, and they're called Living Waters Healings. So I suspect you should be able to put that in the search engine of YouTube as well. Plus, on my website, if you go to services, you'll see Alchemy from the Inside Out, which will give you a description of what this membership is like. You can come in and try it for a week without any cost, and that way you can get to actually really experience the broad range that's being covered in this group.
So can you once again give us, and you can find all this on conversationsfromtheedge.net as well under Linda's section, your website name and how people can find that, and then we will wrap up.
Yes, absolutely. I invite you all to come to thoughtchange.com, and if you're interested in alchemy, you can find that under services. The DNA transformation is there too, as well as living waters. There's a broad range of things that I'm doing. And as I'm shifting in these times, there might be some of those offerings that disappear from that website, because this is such a massive time of transformation for humanity and for each of us individually.
Yes.
We've really got to pay attention to that sense of resonance, that magnetic pull. It's spirit telling us to walk this way.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And I always enjoy when we have our conversations.
Thank you for having me, Christine. Happy anytime to come talk to you.
Beautiful. Thank you. This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.